Welcome to this episode of Colonial Metalsmithing. We're continuing with the North Church Paul Revere lantern, and we're going to be going over making of the door as well as all the attachments for the door. Now, this is the Pentagon takeoff of the North Church lantern, and the door would go right here where where the hem is on the inside, and here the hems are on the outside. I do that so that you can't cut your fingers on the sharp edges. So the door consists of two channels, and these channels of course have hems, and they're slightly thicker than the glass. The top channel that goes with this is designed so that this fits inside the top channel. You get a nice clean finish like you see right here, and the hem is cut back 5/8 of an inch. This is a 5/8 reveal so that it's not in the way. And then the bottom is just a regular member that has two hems on it. And what I do is I always put the glass in from the bottom, and I put two glass clips, which would be like this, and I solder them on, and then when I put the glass in, I bend them over to hold the glass in place. So I have already set this one up. I positioned it so it's centered as good as it could be inside the opening, and now I'll take my soldering iron and I'll solder this and I'm just going to use light tack solders in case I have to make some changes, and then I'll go back and solder at home. And another tat here. Okay, so to get this firmer, I'll take and I'll hold it down so that it fits a little bit tighter. There we go. And the same with this one. And now we have our frame secured. On a brass lantern, I would have pre-tinned the surfaces, so I would just clamp them together and heat them up with a torch, and that's how I would do that. The next step is to put on the hinges, and basically I put a set of 3 and 3, 2 on the door and then 1 on the column at each location. So there's 6 hinges. Now the bending of the hinges, and as you recall, I bent them up into this position, and now what I'll do is I'll take and I'll put a piece of brass rod in here, which is 1/8 of an inch. These hinges are all 1/8 of an inch, and I'll put it in my little vise, and I'll lift it up just a tat. And then what I do is just take my hand and bend it over. So now I have something that looks like this. This is kind of a laborious process, and when I put them on the door, I take them and I mark them with the scribe, and I cut off the excess so they fit nice and tight. And I do that to all of them. And I cut this back. Okay, then I also take a hinge pin, and I'll do it from the bottom up because that's the way I usually start. And then I'll hinge pin all these together. Also, on the door, I'm going to use what I call a pigtail because it's round like a pig's tail. And I'll also put hinges to hold that in place. So this will be the closure. This will open just like a regular door. And one of the complicated parts about these is this particular hinge, which is attached to the column, has to have this curved portion so I have enough meat to really solder it in place. And then I'll take it and mark it, and then I'll cut it again so it only ends up on the middle of the column. So that's basically how you do a door. Okay, so now we have the doors on. As you can see, it's kind of a challenging process. Well, challenging is not the right word. It's a time-consuming process. The door opens and closes properly. Now, if these columns, so if the columns didn't have this round bump out, they'd open. What I'm going to do is put in candles, and candles are pretty traditional, but what I'm going to use is battery operated candles that can be used by a remote. One, you don't have the heat. Two, you don't have any really safety issues. Three, you don't have to plug them in by having wired candles. So it's really a good solution. Now, the next part of the process is putting on the glass clips. And this is a pretty straightforward process. They attach on the insides like this, and they solder in place. The reason I need clips on the bottom is because the bottom is 3/4 of an inch. And when I go to put a piece of glass in, I only have the diagonal distance to work with, which really isn't all that great. So I put this clip in it, which is 3/8 of an inch high. And then on top of that, what I have to do is put inside all these glass clips to hold it tightly in place. Those glass clips are kind of, now this thing opens perfectly. And this is how that attaches. And I'll pull a pin, and what I do now is I go back and I solder the inside of all of these so that they really hold on tight. And then I'll go back and touch up the other side. Okay. So then I do the same thing to these guys right here. And I have to be pretty careful that I don't put too much heat on to unsolder them, so I'll go back and touch up the front side. And I get these two over here. Get these two right here. Next step in the process is to put the candles on the inside. And I made a template, and I did the cutouts for the candles. And I place it inside, and I have these little spacers that I use, and I space them out so that it's equally distant from all 5 sides, or actually 4 sides. but that pretty much centers it. Okay, so it's pretty good. Then I take a black magic marker and I mark the location for each cutout. So there you have the markings. I have my rings and I put them in place and kind of center them. And I always try to keep the slots facing forward. As I mentioned before, the slots are primarily for taking out real wax candles when they would burn down to the point that they were below the candle holder. Then there would be no good way to take it out. But if you put a slot in there, boom, you just pull it out with. So I always like to put a little weight on there to hold it in place, and I'll do a little fine tuning on the adjustment, and I'm good.